thrive and that there's enough for all of us. And we take responsibility for our collective well-being by redistributing resources for the common good. We respect the labor of our volunteers, our agency partners, and everyone involved in growing and harvesting food. And because of that, we fill gaps, solve problems, and try to make it easy for people to help each other. We take joy in our work and the connection it brings. So we build power together in partnership. That's really important to us. And also because we know our future is at stake, we offer solutions to the climate crisis by reducing the emergency food system's reliance on fossil fuel intensive food and making our local food system more resilient to shocks. And then, because we honor the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, we as an organization stand against systemic inequality. We stand for food justice, food sovereignty, and the rights of all people to self-determination. That is a core value that we hold. And because we can always do better, we want to strive to learn from and be accountable to our partners in our community. So that's why we're doing this event, because that's who we are and that's what we stand for. And in this particular moment, because we also acknowledge that everything that we do depends on the land and on our mother, the earth, and no food grows without that. And we're really deeply grateful every day for the abundance that we have access to. And that's what allows us to nourish our community. And we also recognize that the land that we're on was stolen, and it was stolen violently and over hundreds of years, and that that's still happening. And that's important, and it's meaningful, and it's wrong. And just like it's unacceptable for our friends and neighbors to be hungry while good food goes to waste, it's unacceptable to fail to acknowledge that legacy or its implications. We're also a white-led organization. We have white staff, and so we recognize it's not our place to talk about the impact of that legacy on the Indigenous people of the land that we're on. So we felt it was like our responsibility to create space within the space that we occupy to share the voices of those who can speak with knowledge and lived experience about how we're all affected by the loss of food sovereignty in Native communities. So we're committed as an organization to being part of the solution to addressing racial, economic, and cultural injustice in an ongoing way. We're deeply, deeply grateful to have the opportunity to partner with such strong local voices for these issues, especially Loren, the Tomaquag Museum, because of their ongoing leadership. And we feel like it's really important to direct our resources and our relationships towards supporting an organization that has the expertise to speak to these issues that are just so important. So I'm done. From now on, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm just going to ask questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to our panel. But I am going to introduce them first. So Loren Spears is Narragansett, is the executive director of the Tomaquag Museum and holds a master's in education and received a doctorate of humane letters honoris causa from the University of Rhode Island for her dedicated work. She's an author, traditional artist, and shares her cultural knowledge with the public through museum programs, and has the best backdrop in the history of backdrops. Very jealous. Dawn Spears is with us as well. Narragansett Choctaw, Director of Northeast Indigenous Arts Alliance, works to support the Native American artist population regionally by sharing resources and artist opportunities, addressing artist needs, and seeking ways to increase Native artist visibility in the Northeast. Dawn has been teaching and demonstrating for over 25 years in many forms of art and still works creatively when time allows, exhibiting and selling at local galleries and markets. And Cassius Champlin Spears Sr., president of the Rhode Island Association of Conservation District, has dedicated his life to the preservation of Narragansett culture throughout New England and the world. Spears remains active in the practice of ethnobotany, traditional home building, and has demonstrated Eastern Woodlands culture at powwows, museums, college campuses, and film sets across North America. Spears' passion for healthy traditional lifeways led to the establishment of the Narragansett Food Sovereignty Initiative. And Sherry made it and is here, hooray! Chef Sherry Pocknett, Mashpee Wampanoag, is the owner of Sly Fox Den Restaurant in Pocotanock Bay. Did I do all right? No? You can fix it. Sorry about that. Connecticut. She cooks authentic Indigenous cuisine to celebrate and promote local Native American food traditions. So we're so excited to have everybody. And we're just going to start with a pretty open-ended question for our panelists and let them sort of take it. So we saw this amazing film, did a beautiful job, I think, of showing us a lot of these issues that are arise or have been a problem for a long time. So I wonder if you could take some time to tell us about your work with native foodways and your people's relationship to food, both historically and now, which I know is very broad. So
Okay, I guess I'll start. Break the ice here. Yeah. You want to put yours on mute for a minute? Okay. Do everyone else hear that echo?
yeah, everyone has to make sure they mute themselves, and we'll go through and make sure everyone's muted as well, but we can only have one person who's unmuted at a time, ideally.
Okay. Okay. How's that?
Still pretty bad. Cassius, do you want to mute yourself? And Loren, do you want to start us off? And then Cassius, if you and Dawn are in the same room, I think that you might not be able to have one of you up or down, and you might have to join forces in one screen or move to a different room.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Askui Kwasin, Natasuis Makasini Pashao at Nahaigansek, Natasuis Loren Spears at English at Ni Nahaigansek, Nahantek, Kanupiam at Aki at Nahaigansek. So, hello, everyone. I'm Loren Spears, as you know, the Executive Director of Tomaquag Museum. I'm Narragansett Niantic, and welcome to the homelands of the Narragansett people. And I think that when I think about Indigenous foodways, whether that's historically or contemporary, it is that we are the land. Everything that we do to the land, we do to ourselves, and that we are connected directly to this land. Our languages in the land, our culture, our traditions, our foods, our lifeways, everything about who we are as Indigenous people is connected to the land and the landscape. And we look at the gifts from the Creator as to how, whether it's beneficial to eat, whether it's medicinal, whether it's spiritual, whether it's useful. And a lot of plants, they're all of those things. So something like the corn is edible, but it's also spiritual in that we use it in lots of different ceremonies about the corn, but also in the idea that it was symbolic of fertility for the community as a whole. And you can use the husks for making mats and for weaving dolls, just to name a couple things. And so it's all of the things: food, medicine, and I think more than anything, food is medicine, so we don't necessarily have to separate those out. So it's all interwoven together. And I'll pause there, and we can always cycle back around. Let Cassius go now. I think he might have the screen.
Yes, I do. So Eve, can you repeat that question one more time, please?
Yeah, definitely. The question is, tell us about your work with native foodways and your people's relationship to food, both historically and now.
Okay, so relationship for food, or with food, I should say, is, I guess to try to, there's so much, but I'm just trying to narrow it down, is that basically if you follow your food, you can tell a lot about who you are. You can tell about your climate, you can tell your soil type, you can tell the seasons, you can tell, I mean, it's in your songs, it's in your stories. It helps you with your social, economics, your gender roles. All this thing is based around food. So you can't really, or we don't, as Indigenous people, don't really separate ourselves from food, because in order to do that, you'd be separating yourself from your culture and the very identity of who you are, and most of all, what you believe in. Which, when I say that, I'm talking about the values behind how the balance of Mother Earth works. And I just simply said Mother Earth, which again, it projects, you know, what our relationship is to the earth. something, sometimes when I talk about Mother Earth and soil, I talk about the fact that we're all basically byproducts of soil, and you can't forget there's a connection between the soil, and I like to say SWAPA, which is soil, water, air, plants, animals, and then you add the human element to that as well. So that connection that we have between the environment that we live in builds our culture, builds our belief system, and identifies who we are. So food is a very intricate subject, or matter, I should say, that defines, no matter who you are. You can be anywhere in the world, and you follow those breadcrumbs back to your grandmother's favorite recipe, or back to the harvesting of different times of year of different types of food, and automatically your culture starts to just to overflow. So maybe we can talk about this a little bit more in detail later, but I just want to kind of open into the importance of food and to the people that in their environment that thrive off of those resources that are there.
Thanks, Cassius. Sherry or Dawn? Sherry, you have to unmute yourself.
Hi, Chef Sherry here. I had a hard way to put this thing together. But for me, food is the bounty of the season. Indigenous food, indigenous lifeways. I was fortunate enough to grow up this way. So I really didn't think of it as something that was so important to us. It was just a life way for me because of the way I grew up. And then when I got older, all of those traditions, like when I say bounty of the season, I'm talking about our season beginning, our New Year's in the spring, when all new things and the buds coming back on the trees, the birds coming back from the south, and we live this whole system. When I think, could you survive from the bounty of the season now? I would say yes, you can. We have lost some, but we still can. And so I don't want to open up too much, but that's just, that's how I feel. We can still live off the land, especially on the East Coast, because we have the ocean, we have all these great woods still. I mean, we've lost a lot of it, but there is still nutrition for every season, gifts for every season. For the 13 moons, there's something new. And we are going to continue teaching our kids. Keep teaching our kids.
You have a nosebleed.
Yeah, I don't know why. Let me hold off and grab some tissue. I'm gonna, put you on mute for 1 second, okay?
Okay. Dawn, is there anything you wanted to share?
I would just kind of reiterate what everyone else is saying, is that, our world, our life, and everything does revolve around, this place that we live in. We look at the seasons, we look at what foods are readily available. I mean, naturally, not anything that we've planted. I think we can go through the woods and we can do our grocery shopping right there. So we look seasonally to what is available. And I think that's what Sherry was saying as well. So whether it's something that we're, fishing, we know all of this and it's part of our life. So I think that there's a point where we never really separated ourselves from that. And when we talk about food sovereignty and food security, we're also looking at how do we make it not so complicated for some of those things that we are not allowed to harvest anymore. So that, I'm just going to add that because that's going to open up a bigger topic.
Well, and I'm going to add to her a little bit because she's being very modest here. But Dawn as an artist, and we work together and been working together for quite some time. She expresses this through her artwork, like all artists, and it can be in song, it can be in dance. But when you have a healthy harvest, and when you feel that connection and that spiritual vibe, you express that, and I can see a lot of that in her artwork and how she tells a story, tells about her connectedness, and she talks about Mother Earth in her drawings, and how she symbolized this different things and make that connectivity to other things within her drawing. So I have to say, I had to say that because, watching her and being around her and seeing her create that expression is very therapeutic when you understand the values of Mother Earth and what she is talking about and what her relationship is. And once you understand that and look at a piece of her artwork or any artist or listen to their song, you'll find you start to understand it and see it a little clearer.
So I was bombing you, Cassius, because I was showing the Motif magazine that has the 13 moons that Dawn had done, that the print. I just happened to have it sitting here, so I thought I'd share it. But I agree with you 100%. I think that that all of us are, what we're saying in a nutshell is that we're connected to everything in this ecosystem and we're related to it, and it's part of our whole life ways historically through today. Last night, my son made us dinner and it was wild mushroom and venison soup with your kale in it. So, it's the harvest, it's what's available in each season, and that's what makes us healthy. It's the physical labor of going out and collecting and fishing and hunting and gathering these foods. It's the ceremony that takes place before, during, and after the harvest of these foods. It's the songs that are sung while you're harvesting the foods or celebrating in the harvest of those foods in the ceremonies. So it's all connected. The stories, as I think it was Cassius, the stories, the songs, the ceremonies, the life ways. I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's a beautiful way to be. When I think of Sherry, who won the Eleanor Dove Entrepreneur Award in one of our past honorings, and she's actually on our wall here in our Warrior Woman exhibit as well from that. I think of people like my grandparents, that the word food sovereignty wasn't a thing that people were using when they started Dovecrest, but they were doing that because they were bringing forth culture and tradition and foods from the harvest around us. Native people were quahogging and crabbing and selling the foods to the restaurant, and dear Cassius and his parents and siblings, they all did the traditional clam bakes then for Dovecrest, but these things continue on.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's amazing. And I think we're starting to inch into the next question, which is the film that we watched is so much about the idea of food sovereignty. And I have heard you sort of define it in different ways already. But the next question is like to sort of really dig into that definition of food sovereignty. And then how you are achieving it now. I hear about how you've been achieving it, how you're activating it now, and then what it would look like for you and your communities if it was sort of fully actualized in the way that you would want to see it, if you had access to sort of the fullness of food sovereignty as much as it was possible. And I think it's also being able to see Dawn's art is so powerful, and also really fits into that because art is also potentially a process for visioning as well, and to call the future into being, and help us see what that would look like. So I'd love to hear that, hear more about that from all of you. Thank you.
Dawn and Cece, you start.
So, well, I like to start first of all by saying, and we have so much talent within our tribe and tribal people around us. It's in the way they express. So I can't leave that out. We have a lot of ceremonies, a lot of powwows, and and when you immerse yourself in those areas and feel that that the influence that you're getting from their expression, it's really powerful. So I didn't want to leave anybody out on that because there is so much talent here. But I will say that it's food security and food sovereignty. I mean, they're words to us. I agree with what Loren's saying, and a lot of it is based off of your control. Controlling your food, controlling your diet, having access to the food, having the ability to use the land like your ancestors did. So to get away from a lot of the restrictions that may stop you from following these traditions that was carried out for thousands of years. So when we talk about food sovereignty and food security and food control, we mentioned it earlier in the conversation, we're basically talking about our survival, because if you take those things away, you're taking everything that who we are and how we identify ourselves away, and that's why, as the film, when you watch the film, it's worth the fight, because you're fighting for your life, and to be able to understand it from a non-native perspective, that we understand rules and regulations that in a conservation sense, but at the same time, we don't put ourselves on the outside of a pane of glass, kind of looking through at the natural world, and so we never call ourselves really conservationists or preservationists, because we are. When you look through that window, that glass window, you'll see us out there with that natural environment, because that's where we belong, and it means so much to us. So a lot of people say, "Wow, you're really connected to the environment." Like I said earlier, everything from your belief to your gender roles, your political, your social activities, your economics, geographical location. Understanding the gifts that Mother Earth have to give you in all sorts of form, expression through art. When you talk about these things and you start to understand the how important that is to us, it kind of turns the education process, because at early history, it was about teaching the Indian, about teaching the indigenous person to be more like us, an assimilation process, and now as time goes on, it's more about, wow, if I can, now that they speak our language and now that they dress and look like us, and they go to our schools, maybe they can teach us more about what they're talking about. And so for us to be present and persevere from the whole assimilation, colonization and all that, and then still say, kind of like Horn here, who, we're still here and we're not giving up on what we've been doing and why. And we want to invite you into our world so you can value the same values that we have, and maybe we can work together with Mother Earth.
So if I'm gonna add my 2 cents, all of that is true, but we also have to look at a lot of our community members have been influenced by the more dominant culture, and so a lot of them have become disconnected from these traditional ways, or even these foods that we would eat. So a lot of what I would see in a perfect environment for our community is offering healthier food choices. So that would be through growing them and making them available, because right now it's really hard if you're just out there and you're trying to buy, you know, fresh greens, fresh produce for your family. You know, it's hard to afford that. The other thing is that we also have a lot of foods that are readily available to us and convenient to us that are very unhealthy for us. So there's a whole education there that needs to take place. So for me, if we were going to really demonstrate a strong, I have the fly, strong space for our community, we would never forget that we have to do that side of it too, that education and providing those foods, which is something that we've tried to do and are still trying to do, is have that option available for community members.
Yep. And Lorraine, if I can interrupt for 1 second, to add to what Dawn is saying is that, you know, with that assimilation process, you know, by time you taught the indigenous person, by the Western culture taught the indigenous person, you know, how to survive in the world that we live in today, you have to be extremely careful that, what she's saying, you don't lose that your identity, because you can set an indigenous person free, but once he or she lost that connection to Mother Earth, you know, it's hard for them to reconnect, and you see so much of this, you know, that it's you know, it's a constant divide in unity, because it's kind of like still a class of culture, but at the same time, when the government gets involved and actually supports that assimilation process, and by giving money or funding to a person that is disconnected, well, it makes that person even stronger in the view that those individuals will have, and can still push that through into tribes, for example, which again, that divide, or that, you know, that not being unified within that system is what hurts. And I know we mentioned this in one of one of your questions, is that how do you want that to affect? How you said something like, if you could have it your way, what would it look like? And basically, there's so many of us that are traditionalists and practice these traditions and live within the stronger indigenous culture, but we're fragmented. So my vision would be to be able to see that in a community setting, in a community that works with other communities, and eventually, you know, reach nationally, and then even global.
So I'll build on everything that Dawn and Cassius had to say. I was thinking of sovereignty as being able to pass down our traditions intergenerationally. Both Dawn, Cassius, and I are grandparents. They're much more grandparents than I, because I have one. But nonetheless, it's the idea of passing those traditions on. That's part of our healing of that intergenerational trauma or historical trauma that Cassius was referring to. And that trauma is very steeped in our communities. Even though we're resilient and have pushed forward, the dominant society has oppressed us in a way that has caused poverty. and dispossessed us of the land and access in a myriad of ways. But how we fight back is through food sovereignty and asserting our not just desire, but right to have access to these foods, to go harvesting, to go fishing, shell fishing, freshwater, saltwater, to hunt, to grow, and to have each generation being part of that, your children, your grandchildren, and the next 7 generations to come. That's so important. So it's about health and wellness and continuing for next generations, which is so critical. You know, I think, you know, the food sovereignty initiative that Dawn and Cassius founded is so important. When you can hold up an ear of heirloom, if you will, flint corn that is from your ancestors' corn that you're growing today, that you can grind into cornmeal today, there's something really, really powerful about that. You know, so it takes initiatives like the Food Sovereignty Initiative and work that Tomaquag does and work that the Native community does to push forth these initiatives, which is that education piece. Because all of us together, I always like to think if we could put all of our community in a big circle and then you pushed all that knowledge into the center, we have everything we need. It's just that each of us doesn't have everything we need. So we need everybody else in order to have it. Cassius knows if I have to hunt the deer, we're not eating very much today. But if I'm cranberry picking, I'm right there with you, right? You know, so it's the harvesting of all these seasons, but there's something so sacred to doing that, whether that's hunting or fishing or gathering or growing. These are really important things, and they're all part of the food sovereignty components, but it's really about healing, health, and wellness too, because as we've said from the very beginning, all of this is woven together into our culture and our life ways. It's not separated out. It's not food over here and everything else over here. It's all woven together and it's all equally important. And the happiest thing I ever saw was to watch my 1.5-year-old, a year ago, grandson go cranberry picking in this place that, you know, our ancestors picked these wild berries. They were there, and, you know, to have him out there picking the berries and eating them and then finding out they're really tart and spitting them back out, but then keep eating them. The next time we went, he just kept eating them because they're part of his diet now and he loves them and it's part of the community and it's part of what we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Sherry, I know you might want to keep your camera off, but did you want to jump in and share anything about the topic? All right. I'm going to move on and then we can come back to any of these items. I feel like what's happening makes a lot of sense in the way that you're sort of talking about how all these things are interwoven. We're jumping around to a lot of these different questions. Because the next one was about speaking to the cuisine. So that was such a big part of the film, was the idea of chefs cooking for their communities and sort of taking the idea of native food into the vocabulary of cuisine and how you sort of talk about that. And I'm curious to hear more just about how that's happening in your work and your lives around cooking with native foods. And Lauren, you're already getting into that, and it seems like there's probably a lot of that, but I think that's something I'm particularly curious about, is like, what are we all missing, you know? And I feel like so much of Western culture, Western food can be really bland, although we've like grown out of that a little bit more. But yeah, I'm excited to hear more about that. As somebody who loves to eat and loves to eat food, like, it feels like such a joyful piece of the work that there is. So yeah.
Well, I'll lead into it, and I hope that Sherry comes on to where she can follow up with this. But before I start, I have to mention from the last question, I have to say that when I was growing growing up and going down to my grandmother's house a lot, they talked about the Great Depression, and she was like, "Depression? What depression?" because her like Loren saying, her style of life didn't change much from that, because they were living off the land. They were going down to the ponds and getting oysters and crabs and hunting and fishing and gathering and things. So the impact on her, the lifestyle, wasn't so high. But going into this next question, we actually had this idea to educate people, because we feel that it's just a strong factor in understanding food sovereignty, food control, and sustainability. So we actually hosted this food summit, where we sent letters out to everyone, different tribes, asking if they would want to come they were invited to this food summit. And we had so much response, and we had people from folks from Maine, that brought down a truckload of trout. We had people from Alaska. We had people from the desert that was bringing in beans, and we just, like, no matter way. I should mention also
wine from California.
This is all indigenous people that were into food, and they were bringing their food with them. We had some wild rice from the Red Lakes. So they got here and they had all this food, and we was like, and prior to that was like, well, you know what? We all know about each other, and we know about what we like to do and how connected we are. So let's invite people that don't. And I thought at the time that the best folks to invite was the federal government, being that they fund so many tribes throughout the nation. That, wow, wouldn't it be great to have some of those folks here, so we can feed and show them about food. So that's what we did, and we wrote a letter to a bunch of organizations, USDA, NRCS, FSA, a bunch of different associations, and they came, and we actually had the chief of NRCS actually showed up with a DEM and the Department of Environmental Management. A lot of folks showed up to this event, and
so it was really the first time that you would see an event like that, a conference, gathering of people from all different, I'll say, areas come together, but the food was cooked by Native chefs that had come in. So the food was our indigenous foods being prepared by our indigenous chefs, and you got to eat that, and taste and kind of experience,
We had moose being stone boiled, in a wooden bowl, open hearth cooking, fish and duck, and we had cornmeal being processed right on the spot and being cooked. So, and we had a lot of, like I said, it was awesome. It was just a place where it's kind of like, when you invite somebody over to dinner and you're putting your best foot forward with all your secret recipes, and you just laid it out there for them. And when they came in and they tasted stuff and said, yeah, you're eating, wild rice from the Red Lakes, or you're eating these peas that, that you had to hand pick one at a time. So it's like, it was just so overwhelming for them to actually be immersed in all of this. And then at the same time, we actually got to talk to them about, some of the things that prevented us from harvesting or from growing, water rights, fishing rights, hunting rights, and all these different things that, and it was just unbelievable. It's like, this is what you guys do. And it's like, yeah, this is part of what we do, but we wanted to share this with you. And Sherry was there. I don't know if she's on now, but she was one of the chefs that was there, as well as the sous chef and others. And so if Sherry, can you hear me?
I am on.
All right.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm sorry. I don't know where that nosebleed came from, but it won't stop. So, but anyways, yes, that was amazing. That was that amazing. I learned a lot of stuff. I believe I taught a lot of stuff. I wasn't happy that somebody put pine needles in my lobster, but I mean, it's we all just did stuff together, and they showed us their way. I showed them my way. East Coast, you know, East Coast. I think that we just have the best food. The Four Seasons is what really takes it to a whole nother level, because, you know, we're starting in the spring, we're chasing heron, and then from the heron comes striped bass, then comes mackerel, or the mackerel come first, and then there's bluefish and eels, and everything comes to spawn in the freshwater ponds from the ocean. And then our first berry, of course, is strawberries. But the bounty of the season here on the East Coast is like, you know, you have to, like, you have to really teach your kids, your grandchildren. I know you guys are on that. You guys are all over that, just like we are. I mean, because these kids nowadays, they got to work 3 jobs just to make a household work. So they really don't have no time. So what we teach them, how we teach them, my grand songs, and when we're going blueberry picking, we're singing songs, and they're learning their life ways, and this is what we hear. And first you check it to see if it's a male or a female, and they go in their separate piles. Then you're canning the roe from the female. You're cutting off the head, the guts, and the tail for the garden for fertilizer, and you're pickling, drying, or smoking the heron backs. And just to teach our children, grandchildren, and nowadays it's adults that are wanting to learn. So if when we're doing this, we're talking about how we have to, you know, keep these waters clean, keep the land, you know, instead of making your grass green, plant vegetables. You know what I'm saying? We have to teach the way we were taught, how we grew. You know what I mean? And just bringing everything into a full circle throughout the year. Like, I could go on and talk about every season.
Please do.
Okay, so and then you're in the summertime, everybody's in the water fishing, because those fish only run, you know, a certain amount of time. So we're catching them, we're salting them, we're drying them, we're preserving them, we're eating them, and smoking them, because, you know, smoked food for a while. The bounty of the sea, like in the spring, when you get the when you're harvesting garlic and wild ramps, fiddlehead ferns, those fiddleheads, there's about 15 different fiddleheads, and the fiddleheads are very, very short time, and they come early spring to, it depends on how cold it is. They like the cold weather, and they're not everywhere. You got to know where to look for them. You got to know which ones to pick. So, and then you're moving on to our first berry. Now, strawberries were always wild, and there's stories to that, and different stories for different families, I believe. You know, and then you're moving on to when the water gets warmer. You know, you got your trout, the fish are phenomenal. You got your planting, and you're harvesting from your gardens already in June. You know, squashes and beans, greens, a lot of wild greens. So, I mean, can we harvest now? Yeah, we can. We can, cranberries are here right now. Now we're getting ready to ducks,
Loren,
waterfowl.
sorry, Sherry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm
That's
so
okay.
curious
No.
about this idea of education. And it seemed like in the film, so much of what the chefs were doing was about teaching and showing people.
Yeah.
And through the museum, I know you do a lot of educational programming, and I was lucky to attend the Strawberry Festival a couple years ago, which was a delight. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you integrate that into your programs and how that is happening.
Certainly. So it's really happening every day. You can't come through a tour of the museum without talking about food because it's all intersected. But we do have times where we do demonstrations. So we've done, Johnny cake demonstrations, succotash, quahog chowder demonstrations, so food demonstrations as part of the learning. It, you know, in our history and definitely in our future, we'll go back to food samples as part of a tour. And all of the things are connected. So Silva Moon did an amazing children's hour where she basically took the kids on a virtual journey of foraging in their yard to make a salad. So it's constantly being intersected. Children's hour right now that's Lindsay's doing. I mean, the first one was on cranberry. The one that was this week was on pumpkins. And it's, intersecting language and food and stories and life ways and food facts and cultural facts all woven together. So it's woven throughout. Food is in virtually every presentation. I can't even think of one that it might not be in, because it's part of who we are. It's part of the culture. It's part of what it is to be Indigenous and be connected to the land, and to live in balance. And it's part of the indigeneity. So I don't think, when you're talking about the food, you're also talking about the other resources, as I mentioned way back at the beginning. Like if you're harvesting pine needles for pine needle tea, you might also harvest the bark for a bark basket, and it just keeps going like that with every single thing that you see, that there's all these intersections of how you're utilizing the gifts of the land, the gifts of the creator, and then the ceremonies that you're having that connect with those. So we share recipes, we talk about harvests, and we talk about food sovereignty and food justice and climate justice. All of those things are part of the learning that happens here. And depending on how people cycle through the museum or what programs they choose, you talk about it more or less than based on what the concept is. But it's pretty much woven into everything.
Oh, Cassius, I can't tell if you want to say more stuff or not. I feel like you kind of do, but I don't want to. Oh, I can't hear you.
I'll just say this, that, there's a lot of things that we take for granted. So in order for you to really know, you would actually have to come and live with us and just hang out with us for a while. And some of the things that we do, that we just, it's our everyday thing. You kind of understand, our routine and why we do it and why we give thanks and how we communicate with one another and with the land. To try to put that in a classroom format, doesn't really work that well. And Lorraine was talking about it earlier when she said that, she can see, her husband, when he heads out to go hunting or fishing and he brings food back, and when she goes and participate in berry or strawberries and different things, and everyone have their role that they play or they do. And you don't really say, okay, this is your job. It's like we all know what we're supposed to do, and we kind of was taught that way from far back as we can remember. So it's just like a natural, process of what we'll be doing from day to day, or week to week, or month to month.
I do agree with Cassius too, because I think when you're in a day in a life in our household, like it's normal to have all these foods, to have snapping turtle stew, to have wild rice and wild turkey stew, and to have pemmican or dried meats. My son was outside smoking and drying venison, as well as wild mushrooms. And it's like there's always someone in the household doing something, and it's just part of what we do. And as the mom, I do the majority of the cooking, but as I've gotten older, my kids are all really good chefs, so they all started cooking, and they're lending their hand and their own twists on how they are going to prepare the food. Where you get into a routine of what you do with things, they come along and they're like, oh, well, we're going to take this venison and we're going to do this with it. And it's always delicious. So it's such a blessing to watch the kids, my grown kids, their grown kids, Sherry's grown kids, that are out there now, and they're harvesting and fishing and gathering and then creating these delicious foods, and they're making the continuation for our next generations, which is so critical.
And to add to what Loren's saying, is that when we with 7 grandchildren, Dawn and I, we take them and walk through the woods. I mean, yeah, you can say, oh, look, there's a squirrel, or look at that bird, and you can identify different things that are in the woods. But we're doing the same thing with the plants. We're walking there, so, oh, look, this is an Indian cucumber, or look, this is marshmallow. So there's, and the kids are just getting, just learning as time progresses, and we're just kind of like showing them both sides. And I can point out, the values and the purpose and how it relates to us as a community, or Indigenous people, or medicine and different things like that. But I'm nowhere near as good at expression as like Dawn. And you should actually tell a little bit about the corn, the Narragansett Flint corn that you grew, and what it meant to you.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here listening to everybody and thinking, well, because the question was about classes and how we're, teaching and sharing. But one of my fond memories is of that corn that we grew at the tribe's farm. And, when they were planting it initially, I thought, okay, cool, we're planting Narragansett Flint corn, but as the corn grew and it got bigger and bigger, and it got to be about 14 feet tall, which I thought was massive. I guess I had never been around corn growing that closely before. But what happened is, when we did have our food summit, I brought a bunch of our community members over there, and I told them to just stand by that corn and listen to that corn, because when you're standing there, you can almost feel the energy of it. You can feel the energy coming off that corn. And I had a couple ladies in tears as a result, because when you look into it, you could see those stalks of corn holding up each other. And I told them, I said, when I look into that corn, I could see, I could almost see like our ancestors there. They were happy. And what was the most significant thing to me was that corn had been planted by our community, for our community, on our land. And that I had never experienced in my lifetime. So that was, that's something I'll never forget. And I'm really grateful that my grandchildren were there when we harvested it and braided it. And like we were saying, we sang our songs, we shared our food that day. And I think we made memories that a lot of us will never forget as a result. So something as simple as growing corn can mean a lot,
And corn is one of the sisters, the 3 sisters, corn, bean, and squash. So, she's leaving out a lot of information, of course, but, when somebody comes up and say, wow, how close do you plant the corn, and she'll clearly say, well, they got to touch each other, they hold hands, because when the windstorm comes, they can hold each other up. So things like that you're educating people by being right in the environment, and they're like, wow, that's, I never kind of looked at it that way. And then of course, the benefits of growing squash and beans with the corn. But Narragansett Flint corn is a registered corn, and the reason why it's a registered corn is because it was manipulated by man, by our ancestors, to grow in this environment in New England, and it grows so well. So there was one time when I started first planting corn in this soil on this farm. The first year, the corn only grew like 2 foot tall, and it was very discolored, and it was just so poor looking. And I actually went down to. I actually should say I received a grant because I actually wrote a letter showing that how depleted this soil was. This corn has been manipulated by our ancestors to grow here in this environment, and if you look at it, it's stunning. The soil is so poor. The reason why is because the farmers come in every year. They would plant something in that field and just keep taking and taking and taking and never put anything back into the soil. So eventually that soil becomes so poor that it couldn't grow anymore, and they abandoned it. And that's usually the case throughout, in other different, between fish and deer and a lot of different things that we gather or harvest. They have a sad story behind it because of neglect. So when you get the women of our tribe and our community involved, they give that they have that the sense, the life givers, the sensitivity that goes with that, and the understanding, and to take a little seed and treat it like it's a little baby, which it is, and plant it in the soil and nurture that and grow it and talk to it and water it and then share the
bounty.
the bounty of that later on. I mean, that's all heartfelt, and it's all, and when you lack that in a community, when you don't have that anymore, and when you're looking at it as just, this is just a plant, and this is just soil, and this is just this, you're losing so much. So I just wanted to add that to it, because believe me, when Loren and Dawn are with me, they're talking my ear off. So I don't know what's going on now. I usually don't have anything. I can't get a word in edgewise.
He likes to talk.
So we had a couple questions come in, and I always love how it seems like these questions come at like the exact perfect time when they're already sort of being answered in a way. But I'm going to frame it a little bit differently and a little bit more like esoterically. So there were many things that struck me from the film, but some of the ideas around food being the center of life and the idea of balance between people, animals, the earth. There was a phrase used called a restorative revolution, which I thought was amazing, and a really beautiful way to think about it, and really powerful. And the idea of being on the other side of the apocalypse, because the genocide that happened in this country was a form of apocalypse, and now we're on the other side of that. And as Cassius, you were saying, like, when you treat plants as just plants without seeing that balance, you end up with, I think, a sick culture, right? So a culture that needs to be healed. And there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. I think everybody feels that in a lot of different avenues, not just in the realm of food, but across the board, particularly here in this country. And we're sort of dealing with the legacy of that. And the question that came up was the forms of sustainable agriculture. So regenerative agriculture, no-till, intercropping are becoming more mainstream as people are recognizing that we're so out of balance as a culture, as a planet, and that those practices have been inherent in Indigenous cultures already. So there's so much to learn. What else would you want to tell folks about those types of regenerative practices and how they fit into the idea of healing and balance across the board? And I thought that the imagery of the sisters holding hands was just so beautiful. Do you have other things you'd want to share around that?
Cassius, isn't this up your alley?
I was just going to add that a lot of my paintings I've been doing a lot of illustrations, and a lot of them have been about about plants. So I have one that I did that was showing ears of corn, sisters holding each other up. And then I also did a Three Sisters. So I don't know, I just felt the need to just share that momentarily while we had that silence.
But I mean, you can talk about companion planting. You know, you can talk about eating, you know, meats with different plants as well. You can talk about the medicinal value of every plant is either food, medicine, technology, or all of the above. You can talk about the relationships that plants have with, you know, animal species or insects and different things of that nature. So, you know, you can actually break it down into every molecule if you want, but we as Indigenous people don't really look at it that way. We kind of more have a holistic view of things. So, you know, for example, a beehive. Now you can say a beehive is you know, you see every little bee and identify them individually, or you can look at the whole hive as one living entity. And it's not like we understand where in the Western society where your limbs got to be attached to, where a bee is that limb that can separate itself from the hive and reach out and bring things back to the hive, but it's still doing the same thing as our hand reaching out and grabbing something for us to bring back to our body. So, you know, inanimate and animate objects, you know, within our culture, you know, we'll look at the cedar tree or strawberry plant as having a spirit and being alive in a sense, and being very closely connected to us. The importance of a white cedar swamp, for example, and how it works with the hydrology of an area. So yeah, you can go on and on about the importance of plants and the animals and their roles that they play within the balance. And the more you understand, the more you realize that we as humans are basically have learned and is still learning from everything around us. So instead of putting ourselves at the top of the totem pole and looking at everything at our disposal, we put ourselves in the bottom. We learn from everything that's around us, and that's what's kept us alive for thousands of years, is acknowledging those values. So again, could be another whole subject, but there's so much information when you start talking about one's culture and the reasons why, you know, things within, you know, our lifestyle is done certain ways, and how we look at, like I said, how we look at each other, how we look at our community, how we look at the more dominant community, how we look at, you know, Mother Earth, our creation stories. So you have all these things that play an intricate part, again, identifying who we are. But food, you know, is so important with that. And even in the film, it showed thousands of buffalo being slaughtered because they said in the film, they take away our food supply and we're left helpless.
They take away our culture.
And so in that, you know, that was done. If you talk to a lot, basically all the tribes that I've been to, and not even just here in the States, but, you know, elsewhere in the world, I mean, they're going through the same thing. They've been abused and misused, and we're a giving and sharing people, so it's easy to kind of step all over us, and it has been that way in the past.
So I was just thinking about the restorative, and the thing that comes to me the most is that and I think it builds on what Cassius was saying, that we only have one planet. Like, we have one finite planet in which to live on, and we all need air and water and soil and the food that comes from it, and the things that we can make from it to care for ourselves. So to be restorative means harvesting in balance, harvesting in its appropriate season, and that means not just the foods that we eat, but the other resources that we need as well, that you're harvesting it all in balance and you're using just what you need and not the excess. And I think that's an indigenous way of thinking and an indigenous way of knowing. And that's why the earth was already in balance, but now it's in imbalance. And in order to change that, all humanity has to change the way that it's interacting with the earth and with the resources that are there. Looks like Sherry might want to say something.
Yeah, well, exactly what you're saying is like, food is a common denominator, right? So we all need to get on the same page with it. I mean, everybody. These oil riggers destroying black snake out west, in Florida, in the Gulf a few years ago. That big spill. I mean, I don't know. Would you still eat the shrimp from there? I'd never eat anything from the Gulf anymore. You know what I mean? I'm thinking like, how do these indigenous people survive down there, or do they? We have to use this Western system. How could I survive here if something happened to the water here? How could I survive eaten by my lifeways? You know what I mean? I think that this pandemic, I think Mother Earth, I think she brought it here to clear some things up, to shake some people up. You guys may not agree, but I think that she needed to slow stuff down, and she did. And I think, you know, things need to be slowed down even more, and people need to put their heads together and be, you know, what can we do? What can we do to really save this environment, save, because getting commodities again, when I was little, I used to love them commodities. I used to love that cheese. My mother used to make we never had macaroni and cheese, only when we got that cheese. My mother made the best mac and cheese out of it. But I mean, knowing now what I know now about those commodities, how bad they are for us. We didn't have chickens, pigs, or beef, you know, before that. And that's everything that's in those commodities. Or wheat. And wheat's one of the number one causes of diabetes, you know, sugar. But to really pinpoint what needs to be done, what needs to come of, I mean, like all our nations on the East Coast, I think that we've come together a lot. I mean, I never been so associated with Shinnecock, Narragansett, Eastern Pequot, just going, you know, Lumbee, and going up and down, you know, all the Native people, sharing and trading. And are we going to be able to do this still in 10 years? You know what I mean? Massachusetts still has wild rice. You may not believe it, but we still have a little wild rice. There's a wild rice patch. But to keep it, like Danielle Hill, my cousin Danielle Hill, she did a thing about nuts, like great source of you know, protein, fiber, they're great. And some of the nuts, like the ground nut, the ground potato, we don't have them no more because we don't utilize them. We stopped picking them because we got so used to going to the grocery store. And when we don't harvest, when we're supposed to harvest, like you said, Loren, then sometimes we'll lose those things. So I'm hoping that, you know, our tribes will put education in schools, in our Indian schools even. Okay, close my nose again. To teach to cultivate, teach to, you know, see how we can get these things back, and just be aware of our surroundings and what's going on. You know what I'm saying? I just think that we need to really pay attention more.
So thank you. We had a question from a attendee about Indigenous seed preservation or exchange programs, and if any of those exist. And I'm curious about that. And I also want to mention an article that I read recently from an Indigenous woman, I believe on the West Coast, who was talking about corn and how she'd had an experience with a white woman who was a gardener who had come and taken some of the corn that was growing, and it was a native variety, and was like really excited about it and wanted to just go grow it in her garden, but didn't ask first, and just sort of assumed, like often has happened over and over and over again, that we have the right to that, or that we, so I just want to sort of add that component of it to the question, and that so many of the things that you're talking about sound amazing, and you know, what's the balance between like being able to share that and also the concern about people sort of overstepping and assuming that they have rights to or access to some of those native foods, and how do you sort of navigate that?
I'm just going to chime in that there is seed exchange happening between tribal communities, between food producers. So when we do get together at our I don't know, what is it? Food summits. That's one of the components, is seed exchange. And I'm like a little kid in a candy store. I bring all my little bags of seeds, and you know, and then I'm up there. It's like so fun. And just the one thing that's really important with that is that you know where those seeds came from, so you're sharing something from your community with another community. So I mean, I do believe that there's also groups online, and you can exchange seeds that way too. But I mean, you just have to be careful, as I'm sure most of you know. Into that.
I would just say that if long as folks aren't misusing the seeds, you know, gathering these seeds and you know, for profit, or mass production, or to manipulate, and all those kind of things that go with that, you know, you open up another whole can of worms when you start going down that path. But when somebody respects the plant and identifies the plant, where it came from, and teaches a little bit about the plant, I don't really have a problem with that at all. But you know, I have to say, because I was listening to Sherry talk about commodity foods, and I can't help but remember we was traveling out west one time, and an elder came up to me, and he was telling me, you know, we somehow it got in a conversation about commodity foods, you know, and he said, "Yo, yeah, when I was little, I remember them bringing by butter and flour and coffee beans." He said, and he said, "Yeah, you know, we used to use the butter, and I could understand the use of the butter and using the flour, but man, we baked those beans, we fried those beans, we boiled those beans. He said, I just don't understand how they eat them." So so when I hear commodity food, that's the first thing that usually comes to my head, is that when he told me that. But again, it's just, you know, it's something that the things that we're not used to eating, and it's just and not only we, but our body is you know, usually reacts to it as well. So that old saying, "You are what you eat," is, it's a very valuable saying. But going back to the seeds and seed savings and the value of seed exchange is really important. And like Dawn, when we go to these seeds sharing, something that's really common here, we'll bring to another tribe, and they're like, "Oh man, this is awesome. I'd really like to have some of these." And they're most likely giving us something that's common there, but we're the same way. It's like, "Oh, great, yeah, we'll trade," So, but then again, the respect that goes with that, and the understanding and the value, but also in certain aspects, you also have to protect the indigenous plants here, because there's so many invasive plants that come in here. Now, is that our plants, our sisters, actually have the same fight that we have. Finding space to grow and having their own space, and the birds are confused, and a lot of other things that go with that. So those values are also stay within our family, and we try to protect the plants that our sister plants that are here.
Yeah, I want to just interject on that one. At my restaurant over in Pocatonic, Connecticut, Preston, Connecticut, they're redoing, and some of it's on my property. So they I actually asked them, what kind of plants are you going to put back once you take those plants out and dredge all that corner out? What are you putting back? They said, well, we never thought of that. So I said, it's so much Phragmite over there that's eating up all the bulrush and the cattails. So and there's no more eelgrass. That's another thing. Phragmite really, really tears the marshes up. And it's a invasive plant. I think it's from China, someone told me. I don't know if that's true. But those are the things that, we really, because there's no more eels. There are eels, but that was a big part of our diet in the wintertime when the guys used to go eel spearing through the ice. I remember my dad, and as I got older, there were less and less. And my dad said it was because of the Phragmite. I hope I'm saying it right. But those are, and like bulrush, when we want to make mats, cattail mats, you got to search for it. It's, and that cattail, you can eat the palm of that cattail. That's food and shelter. So we just kind of have to watch that too,
So I think we want to take a moment to open it up to the attendees. If anybody wants to ask a question, feel free to either put it in the chat if you want, or we can actually try to have a conversation and kind of raise hands. And if people want to share their screen so we can see you, you don't have to, but it's always nice. Please.
I just still have a bloody nose, and I just rather not. I will if you want me to. If you want
No,
to
you don't have to. Sherry, I am so sorry. This is a bummer, but thank you so much for still participating. And just like,
no, it's not.
Bringing so much to this conversation. I'm so grateful for it.
I'll tell you, whenever I listen to these three geniuses talk, it's so much of more learning from them. For me, they're a realm of traditional genius, I want to say. They know how I feel about them. I love listening to them. I love hearing Cassius and Dawn, and they all have great stuff to teach me.
I was gonna say, I'm sure they feel the same way. And I was gonna say, we just, Silver Moon, I think, is not here anymore, but she left some really beautiful comments about you, Sherry, in the chat that I just wanted to highlight. She has put in a link to your restaurant, slyfoxdenrestaurant.com is in the chat. So if anybody wants to check that out. And then she said that what I love the most about Sherry's cooking is that she fishes, hunts, grows, and forages for her own ingredients. You can literally taste the land, which I think is a beautiful, beautiful idea, and sounds really tasty. I ate a full meal before I got on this, and I'm still getting really hungry listening to everybody talk. So I feel like that's a good sign of a successful event if everybody feels a little snacky when they're done. But yeah, does anybody want to ask a question? I have a couple more that I can get us going on, but if other folks want to, oh yeah. So we want to know from Sherry if we can visit your restaurant, and if so, when it is open, and where it is. You said Connecticut, but that's a big state, so hopefully it's not too far away.
Yeah, so the restaurant is actually not open yet. The restaurant is a lifelong dream of mine that I was able to purchase February 1st, 2019. It was a bar room, so it needed a lot more work than I thought. And how I purchased it, I don't know, but I did. And it's mine. We've done a lot of work to it. But it needs a lot more work.
If folks wanted to go eat there someday, is there a way that they could support the restaurant project? That's one of the questions that I have, which is kind of a broad question, and not just that, but specifically that, and then in general, what resources you feel like you have, and then what resources you feel like you need as a community, as an individual, as an organization to continue this work and move it forward. So starting with Sherry, is there any way we could support your restaurant project so we can go eat there?
Well, right now I have a food truck.
You have I think your connection's a little spotty and we might be losing you, but
she has a food truck. She has a food truck.
Well, right now, actually there was a food truck that I just got rid of on Sunday. And I'm waiting for another one, a food trailer. So right now I'm just doing delivery, and on social media.
Awesome. So we are going to find out.
Sorry, my nose is right.
No worries. We're going to find out what your social media tags are, and we're going to put those in the chat. And then, not super well.
So yeah, you can call the telephone number. It's on the website. I'm in between Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun. And deliveries.
Awesome. Loren, Cassius, Don.
I can't hear you.
I was wondering if you wanted to jump in on that question.
Yeah, go on. You can go on.
So I would say, I would definitely say that Dawn and I are in the process of putting together another food summit, and we'll definitely have Sherry there if she would like to come. And so we will advertise that. And so if you are interested in tasting some of Sherry's Cooking, that may be the place to go if you can't make it to her food truck, or and I don't know when she'll have her restaurant available, but you know, you have to, you know, there's advantages and disadvantages of this virtual world that we're in. And, you know, right now you can't smell Sherry's cooking, you can't feel the vibe of her in the kitchen. And that's where she shines the best, is when she's putting together a meal for a bunch of people, and she's, you know, and she went out and gathered all the ingredients to put into that, and you just can see the passion and everything there, and her smile. So that part of Sherry we can't see today. So it's unfortunate that you're not being able to feel that presence. But if you haven't tried any of the food, I would suggest, whatever you have to figure out to do that, it'd be worth the wait and go.
Yes, we
Wow,
love Sherry's
Cassius,
cooking.
thank you.
Love you, Sherry.
That we all do. Got to get your favorite every time. You can certainly have frog legs, and you can have salmon, and you can have smoked bluefish, just to name a few things. It's so delicious. To answer the question, first, I just want to say thank you to the Hope's Harvest for just hosting this wonderful event, and for all the other panelists that are joining me to share perspectives on Indigenous foodways. And I just wanted to thank the audience too. There's been many people supporting Tomaquag Museum through the fundraiser tonight. So I really wanted to say thank you for that, Katabatash. You know, I think when I think about how people can support Tomaquag Museum and the work that Sherry does, the work that Dawn and Cassius are doing, is even just sharing the word, you know, spreading the information that you've learned tonight, and the links and the access to the resources that we all have. And we all work to uplift each other, and that's very much an Indigenous way of being. Sherry has cooked here at Tomaquag Museum, and Dawn and Cassius have intersected with the museum in a myriad of ways, sharing their cultural and traditional and ecological knowledge. So I think that we're living in such a strange time, but as Sherry mentioned, you know, it's part of what we need to do to get back in balance. And so supporting all of these ventures, and thinking about how we can be impactful to Indigenous people in the rights of access to waterways and the rights of access to foraging. That's really important. I mean, we're fighting that a lot. My husband, Robin, which is Cassius's brother, has been, you know, talking with the political brokers, because they keep, every time we have access, they always find a new way to block access, and you have to spend all this time fighting your way back to the salt ponds and to the waterways, and to ensure your right of ways as Indigenous people. My own kids were harvesting mushrooms on the side of the road, and some folks that weren't so pleasant came out and yelled at them and said that they were on private property, which may or may not be true, since it was really close to the road. So the kids left, but then they had to drive down that same road the same way to go back home. And they saw that the person just took a hammer or a bat and just busted up all the mushrooms. So it wasn't that they wanted to harvest them, but they didn't want you to harvest them. And that's the kind of stuff that I think, you know, this sharing this knowledge with other people, and the importance of this connection to the land, and the importance to our people spiritually, socially, culturally, emotionally, medicinally, you know, for our health and well-being. We have to be able to harvest these things and participate in this cultural norm. And that's something that I think people can do, is they can share that knowledge and understand that Indigenous people aren't on their land, so to speak. They're still walking and going in the places that their ancestors once went to harvest these things. This is literally our land that they occupy, and that people need to understand that. So that's what I would say would be beneficial.
I agree with you, Loren. Those are ancient ways that belong to us. We have the same problem in Mashpee. It's really bad. I mean, People are taking lobster pots out of the canal from my cousin's lobster pots. Just harassing because we have these treaties, Aboriginal hunting and fishing rights. Those are treaties that are in the Constitution, and they have to be. We had to fight. My dad fought for 30 years for these treaties to be, acknowledged, and we're still living this way. So they have to acknowledge it. And we're not asking. We're not asking. We're letting them know that this is our life way. So, if we have to go through an ancient path in your yard, that's what we're doing.
So I want to chime in too. I agree with Loren. First, I want to thank Hope's Harvest for putting this on, for sharing the film, because it's really important to have this information shared. But I also want to just quickly share, we had our grandchildren out on the beach, a local beach, and the guys were fishing, but we had 6 kids out there with us. So if you can imagine, 6 kids, 7 to 2 years old, playing and having in the water, and I mean, they were having a blast. Well, my husband caught a fish. He's carrying the fish down the beach to show his grandchildren, and this man is harassing him while he walks down the beach because he's saying the fish is too small. And I didn't realize any of that till he got closer to us. And of course, the kids go run to see Pop and see this fish, and I'm like, what is this man doing? Another man came up, took the fish, literally, I feel like took the fish away from him. But I was ready to, once I realized what was going on, I was ready to fight. Because I'm like, are you seriously taking this fish away from an Indigenous person on the beach, right in our backyard? And you can see all of the Native kids sitting right there. There's a problem with that. And so, yes, I was ready to fight. My brother was ready to fight, and it just, it infuriated me. How is that okay? They threw the fish back in the water anyway. And I mean, the fish was so close, but I'm just saying, why is it that we have to conform to these restrictions that were placed to control the fishing? I don't feel those restrictions were put in place for us, or they shouldn't have been. So this is, again, another topic that could have talk about forever, right?
Yeah, Dawn, that's because Native people don't overfish. We don't overfish. We don't.
Exactly.
And unlike, we have to, they have to practice what they preach.
I was ready to fight.
I would have been fighting.
I was ready to fight. I couldn't believe
that guy
fish
would have been in the
back
water,
in the water.
right behind that fish. I hate to say it.
I know. That's the women.
But, and sad to say, but in many cases, that emotion that you have in being unprepared to actually carry it the full term is what gets us, because instead of us fighting a battle individually, we have to unify ourselves and like they said in the film, and we all come together and we all stand up and we talk about making this right throughout the nation, instead of kind of like every man from the South. And I feel there's a lot to that, and I feel that eventually, if we're not there yet, we will be. I do see the youth very active and very involved and want to get engaged, and they have the schooling behind them, and they understand their rights. And I feel that, and then the support from their family, from their elders, that will carry it a long ways. And then with the technology that we have to be able to reach out to other nations as well, there will be a change. There's already a change in the works, but it's very hard to not be emotional, extremely hard, because the story and what happened to you and your ancestors. So you're ready to fight at any given moment. But the folks that you're dealing with know very little about that, or nothing, you know, and that's the challenge that you're up against.
Yeah, I really hear that call to action, and I hear that call to step up and support so that you don't have to fight alone either. And I want to mention, I keep thinking that you know, we had almost 100 people sign up for this event, and I'm going to guess a lot of them are like me, where they're excited about the recording afterwards, but maybe couldn't make it at this time. And so I think that, you know, as much as we can amplify this, and as much as we can share these stories and tell our friends and tell our neighbors when we see things, and make sure that we're taking a stand for each other as members of our shared community, I think that is a big part of what we can do to sort of, you know, bring an end to the injustice that continues, and that's not okay. And I guess, yeah, so the last question I have is sort of related, and I feel like you've been answering it again, as has been true this entire time. We have about 5 more minutes before we're going to kind of move into wrapping things up. But what can the attendees of this event, or the people who are listening to the recording, what can we do to bring more justice and healing to the Indigenous communities, and people who don't necessarily know, you know, in addition to sharing, in addition to standing up, what would you ask of us, and how can we step up?
So I'll say, is a continuation of what I was just saying earlier, is that you mentioned in the beginning, and I'll say it again, that I'm actually the president of the Rhode Island Association of Conservation Districts. So when I was on that beach that day, and Dawn was ready to fight, you know, it just told me how much more work I have to do, because I'm in my position. I try to change policy, and I sit on a lot of different committees that work with policy making, because we, you know, the design justice of a lot of language, we weren't included. So to be able to sit on those tables and talk about making some changes to that verbiage that will benefit, you know, those moments on the beach, or what Sherry was talking about, and those kind of things, is so important. So, you know, I was taught a long time ago that instead of attacking something right there, you have to go to the source, go to where it's coming from, go to where those orders were given, and make changes there, and that will filter down and help so many people. So I feel that every one of us kind of does that in our leadership positions, if it's through art and expression, and everything that Lorraine works on, in all the different organizations that she talks to and meet, and through the museum. I think we all do that in our own way. But to end this, I would say that that if to help is to understand, and then once you understand, it would be taking it to the next level of leadership that can make those changes, and advocate for, you know, what we believe in and what we're trying to do. So I think that I'll stop there, and I'll let Dawn and Lorraine and Sherry kind of add in to that. But I just don't want it out there that we're not doing anything. We are doing what we can, and we are putting ourselves in positions, and we're being role models for the next generation to see how we are doing this, and we can already see the changes. So, you know, the support that we get from just the listeners out there today is very valuable to us.
And so I would say, yes, every time we are in a position where we can share our story, we're making a little bit, we're chipping away at that, because we are educating. there is a Narragansett Food Sovereignty page on Facebook, so we do have that on social media. We also do have a Instagram page, which hasn't been very active, but I would say stay tuned, because there should be more to come in the next, few months. So yes, our work hasn't stopped. We're still very active, and we have more to do, lots to do. So yeah, stay tuned.
So I think that environmental justice is Indigenous rights, and Indigenous rights is environmental justice. So when you look at it from that lens, in the chat, people were talking about voting. And so yes, vote, but also, vote to approve changing the name of this state, which is oppressive to Indigenous people and communities of color. It's supporting Indigenous-led businesses and nonprofits like this museum, and artists and culture bearers. It's thinking about in your own organizations implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice initiatives that also speak to Indigenous people. And inclusion of Indigenous people within that. And I think that that's something that we really have to think about. So I think it's also advocating when you're at the table at any of these powerful places where you can say something that when there's no Indigenous person there, that why isn't that the case? Why are they not invited in and at the table? So those are things you can do to advocate. You can invite Native people to be on your board and in your organization, and various ways like that. We get reached out to a lot, and we try to broaden the network, because a few people can't do everything, but a lot of people can get things done. So I think that those are all really important things that you can do, is in supporting not just these three organizations that we're talking about, but the network of Indigenous organizations across this region, as well as the nation as a whole.
That is a phenomenal list.
Yeah.
Thank you, Loren. That was epic. Sorry.
That's all right. I just like to add, maybe Cassius, maybe, all three of you guys, maybe take a look at, my father worked for 35 years for Aboriginal hunting and fishing rights. And maybe if I could hook you guys up with my brother, he is the chair for Fishing and Game Commission for our tribe. And maybe take a look at how they went about it to do it. But it did take that 35 years, and we are still fighting, and we will continue to fight. People don't want to accept it. They don't think it's fair. They think that we need to buy a license or something. So maybe, if you guys will be able to just take a look at, the steps that we had to go through, who we had to talk to. But Rhode Island is real tough, I think. It's playing with a different people. So, all just getting together and creating solutions, especially on the, fishing and hunting, as far as I know, because they're still stopping our people, just like in, Micmac territory. It's awful, pulling out lobster pots and shooting at people, just trying to feed their family.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna wrap things up a little bit, and the one thing I wanted to mention is all of these incredible ideas and thoughts and information. And if you are called to action, you do feel motivated and mobilized, please, if you are not a member of an Indigenous community, please always remember to take your direction and your guidance from those communities before you do anything, and make sure that you're sort of following guidance and the asks that are there. Yeah, I just felt like that was an important thing to mention. So, all right. Wrap-up items. If you have not already, or even if you have, please consider making a donation to the Tomaquag Museum. I know end of year is coming up, so that's a really important piece of this event. It felt really good to hear the idea of there being like everybody lifts everybody up, and that's what we do at Hope's Harvest as well. And we also follow the many hands make light work principle when we go out into the field and we're harvesting and we're gleaning. The way we're able to do that is because we have all these people come and step up together and do that, and it makes us able to accomplish so much. And so we're all about there being abundance and about enough for everybody, and sharing that as much as we possibly can. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to sort of demonstrate that in more ways than just picking kale. Although we are also very happy to pick kale. And that kale came from Arcadian Fields Farm. Just a little plug for the farm. Loren did a great job of putting some links in the chat about events and where you can find out more about things that are happening at the Tomaquag Museum. So please definitely go check those out. Seems like there's a lot of really amazing offerings online right now, which is awesome. And, you know, we've all done what we can to shift our way of doing things so that we can still share the knowledge that we have. And it seems like Tomaquag's been really, really adaptive and able to evolve and put a lot of stuff up online. So that's really great. Please definitely go take a look at that. Hope's Harvest has a few events coming up this season as well. It's a big time of year for us. We're doing a lot of harvesting, but it's also a time where we really like to bring all our volunteers together and be able to thank everybody and feel sort of grateful for what we've been able to accomplish over the season. So we do have a food preservation class coming up on November 11th, where we'll be talking about how to preserve the harvest. And there's so much abundance at this time of year, and how to make sure that you're taking full advantage of that. And we also have our Friendsgiving event, which is on November 19th, which is an opportunity to just thank all of our volunteers and celebrate and do some silly things together and play games and just hang out. And we're gonna have music, and we're gonna have art, and we're gonna try and do our best to pretend like we're with each other in whatever ways that we can. So I hope you come join us for that. All are welcome. And I just want to, again, invite everybody to continue to learn and take action. There's so many resources and there's so many ways to be involved. There's so much work to do. And the most important thing is that we can do it together, and that everything is easier when we're engaging in this together and supporting each other. So thank you for being here. And, you know, if anybody else wants to have the last word, I'm happy to hand it off. Thanks, everybody.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I love it when people think about me when it comes to food. I love food. I love to cook for people. I love to educate about the bounty of the season. I love especially learning from Dawn, Cassius, and Loren. They're amazing people. Thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Dawn and Cassius. Thank you, Ava and Sammy and everyone that worked on it from Hope's Harvest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night, folks.